This episode is brought to you by Blinkist. Did you ever just want to be a better version of yourself? A more confident, knowledgeable you? The fastest way to do it is to get learning. Learning about a new topic or skill, revisiting one you learned about in the past, or getting up to speed on something everyone is talking about right now can not only broaden your horizons, but also boost your self-esteem and success too. That's where the Blinkist app comes in. Blinkist takes top nonfiction titles, pulls out the key takeaways, and puts them into text and audio explainers called Blinks, and gives you the most important information in just 15 minutes. Use Blinks to learn about topics like philosophy, history, and science, or dive into psychology, health and nutrition, or personal growth. You've got thousands of titles and 27 categories of the world's best knowledge to choose from. If you're more of a podcast person, they have you covered with Blinks for Podcasts, called Shortcasts. Blinkist has the wisdom from top nonfiction bestsellers and podcasts, packed into powerful 15-minute reads or listens, all in one app, and right in your pocket so you can learn anytime, anywhere with Blinkist. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/maze to start your 7-day free trial and get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/mays to get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/maze.
This is the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Really excited about today's show. I think it was 2 weeks ago, Nate, right? It was 2 weeks ago that you and I broke down the lessons that we learned from watching the best offenses in the NFL. We went through and, watched 5 to 10 of the best units in the league. What were the big picture takeaways? What were some things we thought could apply to the sport moving forward? Things we might see in 2021, stuff that has defined the sport over the last year or two. And we wanted to do that on the defensive side of the ball, but you and I are completely unqualified to do that properly. So in order to do it the right way, we decided to have on the one, the only, Deontay Lee from PFF. Deontay, thank you very much for joining us, my friend.
It's an honor to be on the show. Nate is in the mythical group chat of a whole bunch of online football guys, and we always talk about, trying to get on each other's show and talk about what we've seen, what we like, what we don't like in football. So I'm more than excited to be on today.
I shudder to think at the slander toward me that exists on that group chat with a bunch of people who know a lot more about football than me. But I digress. Somehow I will survive. So we're not structuring it the same way with this. It's not going to be specific lessons. We really just wanted to pick your brain about some more big picture, general concepts, ideas, the tide, more or less, about the way the game is going. So let's start with just your general takeaways. I know you dug into a little bit of this just as a project when I told you we wanted to do this, which I sincerely appreciate. So The stuff you watched, all of the backlog of information, film you dug into, what were your main 3 or 4 bullet points that you came away with after watching some of the league's best defenses?
The most interesting thing for me is, or at least starting off, is not what's changed, but what remains the same first, because I do think that that's going to inform what changes are being made and why they are. So defenses and defensive coaches still believe that playing middle of the field closed defense with a safety in the middle of the field, playing cover 3 and cover 1 is still their best bet to stopping the run on early downs. I don't know how long of a on-ramp we're going to be looking at before we get to some of the changes we cover, maybe taking over for that coverage as a base defense. But that's still kind of what we're looking at in terms of where trends are at on first and second down. What's interesting is what kind of change ups we're getting to. And this is something that I kind of had my interest peaked on when I was listening to your offensive podcast. When you guys were talking about some of these different changeups and curveballs that offenses are running while still being true to maybe like the ancestors that created these offenses, right? The fathers of the West Coast, the fathers of the Air Coryell, people who are taking from these schemes, and whether it's different formations or, motions and things like that. So on a fundamental level, defensive coaches do still believe that cover 3 and a 4-man pass rush is the best way to go about playing on early downs. What's interesting now, though, is that I think defenses are starting to become a little bit more comfortable with playing split safeties on first and second down as well. And my guess on that is because of the threat of the bootleg, the threat of the play action, and the explosive plays that offenses can get to off of their series of outside zone to bootleg or duo to your deep 7-step play action concepts. Trying to create different levels of the defense to steal those over routes, those big home run posts that we see maybe 3 or 4 shots throughout a game. That's probably been the most interesting thing. And the teams that are kind of at the top in terms of like EPA with run and pass defense in the past couple of years, they all are running quarters at about the same rate on early downs. So that's telling me that across the league, as guys are studying each other and trying to figure out how they can improve, it seems like everybody's kind of coming to the same answer that having to play cover 4 or quarter halves or cover 2 on early downs is a necessary evil in order to protect yourself against the threat of explosive plays on early downs, which offenses are realizing is going to be fundamental for them scoring the way that they need to score to be winning teams.
Which is really interesting. And you look at just how that has dictated the last decade of NFL football, right? Nate, you and I have talked about this so often. Mm-hmm. Looking at that cover 1, cover 3, single high safety structures, I mean, that's a direct result of the proliferation of what was happening in Seattle. And that's where teams were going, and that's the major influence there. And then the next step from that offensively is, like Deontay mentioned, all of those deep crossers, all of the boots, all of the play action. If you look at what the McVays and the Shanahans and that tree that is now the most popular offensive version of football in the league is designed to do, it's designed to specifically attack those sorts of defenses. So now you have this back and forth, and now maybe we're looking at the next step of this. So Nate, what about that give and take with the single high and all of those deep crossers and the play action? What about that do you think has had staying power? Why do you think offenses have been able to kind of stay one step ahead because defenses are so attached to that version of stopping the run in the way that Deontay laid out?
Well, with offenses too is as West Coast became more prevalent in late 90s or 90s, I should say, in 2000s, when that became more of a staple for every offense, as opposed to like, oh, we stole 2 plays. It's like, now every team had 15 to 20 plays running snag and double slants and all that stuff. Not that anyone did it first, but it became more prevalent. Is defenses were like, okay, we're going to let you throw for 67%. If completion percentage, but we're going to tackle you short of the sticks. And guess what? You're going to punt it on 4th and 3. We don't care anymore. Like, okay, fine. We'll let you complete it. Like before it was like no completions, but they became comfortable going, okay, we'll fine taking a 5-yard gain when you need 7 and making you punt because now offenses are going for it more on 4th down. So that's a whole nother thing.
Would you say that's a direct, when you think about just the areas the field defenses were covering, would you say that's indicative of the move from more cover 2 to more cover 3 and single high because you had 2 guys in the flat and now you're letting that space exist to offenses more?
Yep. And how corners have been taught. I've seen a big kind of transition as that's going throughout the league and on lower levels, like corner play is becoming really cool. Like it really is, but really it is. It's becoming like a cool thing to do is being a good corner is just staying on top, especially in that cover 3 look, that 3 match look that, Seattle, of course, made prevalent and Zimmer and Cincinnati did some stuff, but staying on top, playing with length, okay, limiting the big plays, but then understanding how the offenses can attack you. And that's why match coverages have become where people are just more comfortable doing it because they realized, well, if this guy goes in, offenses need somebody to be over the top of it. Or, they have to create a high-low. They have to create a smash concept on the outside. And once defenses go, well, offense can only do these couple things. All right, let's just practice against those couple things. All right, well, everyone knows the look now. And now that's why motion has become the swing back is we're showing you this look. Right at the snap of the ball, we change the look on you. And that's why that's become the counter to those matchy looks. I'll just call it a blanket term, the matchy looks. But really, it's funny is one little tweak that I've noticed even the last few years, especially with the single high stuff, or even just what I call 3 buzz week. I think it's just 6 buzz, I think is the actual proper term, but I call it 3 buzz week. But we saw it a lot with Sam. Yeah. So 3s, cover 3s, the safety coming down, and he's going to be, outside usually. A typical cover 3 look, he'd be covering over to the slot. 3 buzz is the safety rotating down inside of the guy going to the flat in a traditional spot drop look. Now, the 3 buzz week, what we saw with like San Fran's running in their Super Bowl year, it was they're rotating the guy away from the trip side. And that's something you'd see some guys run on 3rd and long, but now you're seeing more prevalent. And why that became more prevalent was because offenses started running over routes. and over routes. And rather than having, not everyone has Bobby Wagner. We've laughed about that, Robert. It was really easy to have ask your linebacker to run with the number 3 speed at 3, right, Deontay? And all of a sudden you have a 250 pound linebacker running with speed at 3. Like, not everyone could do that. So how else can we stop these over routes that are crushing us? Okay, well, we'll have the safety rotate down and basically catch them and wait for the route. So now offenses are starting to have counters to that. You see the return routes. You see more sail routes that sell the over and then come back. You're seeing now the change up off of that. But now I think it's just kind of like putting these things together and writing this stuff out. We say the quarters look, the too high look, the Fangio and Staley, what really they start in that too high shell. And then one of those safeties comes down and snap the ball. They read it, but
right into those crossers.
Exactly.
Correct. As opposed to predetermining, hey, this guy's rotating the ground away from trips. We're going to have other rules. So now we have 2 safeties that can adjust off of that. I think it's just giving themselves more flexibility to defend themselves against these plays. Because now it's like, well, the offenses are getting creative with it. We have to be flexible against that creativity. And also we're going to talk about it in a little bit. I have plenty of notes on it, but also it's kind of cool to see what's being asked of safeties now. And that's becoming such a more prevalent position in a modern defense.
And I think that, to your point about flexibility, again, it pays to go back to figure out where things are going forward. So
yes,
the way that you said that motion gives offense an advantage now, that to me is really just the same kind of corollary as talking about safety rotation against 21 personnel. That's where defenses had an advantage in the 80s, in the 90s, when everybody was playing with 2 backs and a tight end, right? I can rotate strong. I can rotate weak. I can rotate strong and inside. I can rotate weak and inside. I can roll up a corner. We can play Tampa 2, whatever the case may be. There are all these options when we weren't thinking about like space as a constraint defensively because everybody was in the core of the formation. In a more modern game where everybody's playing out of 11 personnel and it's not just 11 personnel, there's a dude in the slot or there's a dude at Y.
Your best receiver in the slot at times.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the stuff you have to worry about now.
That changes the calculations defensively. So to that point, now there has to be more in the playbook from a coverage perspective. If you do play at Kansas City, and they're an extreme example, but I think that they're the most indicative of where football is at right now.
Yes.
When number 10 is in the slot, and he's the one on the ball, you better have an answer,
Yeah.
You better have an answer. And so to that point of the 6-week buzz or playing quarters, which buys you a little bit of disguise, just trying to buy some of that changing of the picture and some of that unpredictability back from the offense. So that way they can't just line up and tell you what you can and can't play.
And this is what it's so cool is coverages are becoming, I don't even say sophisticated, but more sound and just having rules with everything, but it is a little more sophisticated, I guess. But it's, Deontay, when you're in college too, remember every drawing that you saw in install was against a fullback, a tight end, 21 personnel. Every drawing was just base offense. And then now base offense is, 2x2, 3x1. It's more spread stuff. And really the guys that were starting to realize that had an advantage in going. So the offenses were, okay, we're just going to spread it out. We'll go spread. You guys don't have as many rules against that. You have 100 rules against I formation, but not so much against 2x2. Okay. Now defenses came up with their rules. Now offenses are going, okay, Legion of Boom is smoking every curl flat we run. Legion of Boom is smoking every 4 verts concept. Legion of Boom is every cover 3 baiter you could think of. Legion of Boom was ready for it. So now it's like, all right, well, shit. How do we attack this in a different way? It's either going heavy, like that's why some of the Shanahan Kubiak offenses have been, pretty good these last few years, is they can do a lot of stuff out of heavier personnel, 21 and 12, and make the defenses be more vanilla. And go back to that day one install stuff as opposed to all the fancy fun stuff that they have versus spread. So it's funny, like you said, going back to offense too, is going back to the roots of football is sometimes how you find the answer. It's like, what was the original beaters? What was the original stuff that gave you guys fits? But it's like, it's just the chess match that goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth constantly.
All right, let's bring this back down for the idiot in the room, which is me. So let's, on its simplest level, let's talk about the transition to more quarters coverage on first down. Because like you said, Deontay, some of the numbers are jarring. If you look at what we would call some of the best defenses in the league from last year, I think the Rams are that. Best coach defenses, I think the Niners are absolutely that. Those teams were at the top of the league in quarters coverage on first and second down. It was about 200 snaps on the season. It was about 1/4 of their total first down snaps, first and second down. The Browns were also there, which makes a ton of sense because Joe Woods came from San Francisco, where he was solid the year before. So why do you think, outside of some of the disguise stuff we talked about and the layers of complexity it adds, why do you think more quarters on early downs make sense, even if teams are using it as a way to stop the run?
I think it's really the threat of the boot pass that has changed the way that defensive coaches are thinking about stopping the run. So when you think about like your Shanahan, outside zone to bootleg when you're running that Y cross or Y over concept, and not to try to get too deep in the weeds here, but in cover three, the way that you would respond to that, or the reason why you play cover three the way you do, is because it creates certain layers in the defense, right? You have your pass rush, you have your underneath defenders, and you have your over the top defenders.
Mm-hmm.
When you get play action, what that does is brings your underneath defenders to the same level as a pass rush, right? So you're manufacturing space. That's where all those Y cross concepts off of play action can be as deadly as they are.
You can see that. You can see the linebacker stepping up. You can see the voids created behind them. It's so easy to picture.
Exactly. So now the trade-off on the defensive end is cover three is better for stopping outside zone because you have curl flat defenders on the outside of either side of the formation, right? There are people who are close to the line of scrimmage who can force the ball back inside. You make your tackle at or near the line of scrimmage. Everything's good. But now I think defensive coaches are more comfortable with, hey, if it's 4.5 yards on first down for outside zone to protect me against the threat of a 22-yard gain on a bootleg pass, then that's what it's got to be. Because now when you get bootlegs, because it's 4 deep defenders, that safety on the opposite side of the crosser has better vision. Like it's really just as simple as what I can and can't see. If I'm right near the line of scrimmage, I don't have the same kind of vision on routes that are running behind me, right? I don't have an advantage in terms of body positioning. At safety in cover 4, I might actually be able to see that, get in front of it, and be able to take that route away and change the progression for the quarterback. So, I kind of try to rack my brain around it because sometimes I fall victim to not just taking the philosophy of Occam's razor, right, where the simplest answer is typically what it is. But the more of the tape that you watch, that's really as simple as it gets. Teams that play more cover 4 on early downs, they do give up more yards against outside zone, but you don't see as big of a percentage of them giving up like explosive plays, and like the depth of target shrinks in play action passes because they're playing cover 4.
And that's what Brandon Staley said to me in December at the very simplest level. It's like, if the game is about limiting explosive plays, wouldn't it make more sense to limit explosive pass plays? Because think about it structurally again, right? If you're playing cover 4 and you have that safety that would typically be down in the box playing 3, 4, 5 yards deeper, when he steps up against play action, he's stepping into those crossing routes rather than stepping up into the line of scrimmage. So it makes total sense. Nate, you have been around coaches for a long time, and we obviously know that some of this cover 4, 2 deep stuff on rundowns has worked. It's worked for Fangio, but it never took hold. Now it's worked for Staley, and it does feel like that proliferation is happening, right? We have Sean Desai is now a Fangio disciple who's taking over as defensive coordinator in Chicago. Joe Barry, who came from LA, is now the defensive coordinator for the Packers. That tree has now started to spread in a way that it didn't when Fangio was at the center of it. Why do you think the coaching community and defensive coaches in general have been slow to adopt some of these ideas, even if there has been proof of concept in what Vic Fangio's defenses have done over the last few years?
Coaches are just slow to it. I think a lot of it is they have to just see more than one team do it. It's this weird thing. If one team does it, it's an outlier. Oh yeah. Otherwise everyone would have copied Mike Shanahan for years right after he came in, and Alex Gibbs when they were in the Broncos tearing it up. And it's like, okay. And then Kubiak comes along. It's like, okay, maybe it does work for more than one team. Okay, but Kubiak's a Shanahan guy, so it's just because he's 100%. Okay, but then those guys proliferate around the league, and they realize more of those assistants get around. Maybe the head guy isn't like that stuff is a little more flexible. The rules, because we know coaches, they try to be tight knit, but then really they like to gossip on the side or talk on the side. It's the funniest thing in the world. But I think a lot of times is they get a little loose-lipped, and as stuff becomes like, hey, the rules of that, why we did it, they want to talk about. All of a sudden, the stuff comes around once 3, 4, 5 years down the road. People, Saban's match defense, no one knew what the hell that was 10, 12 years ago. They knew what it was, but you didn't have the rules of it. Now everyone knows the rules of it. No, I'm not trying to dog or anything, but the rules are out there. The drawings are out there. there's people talking about it. There's people giving clinics on it. And I think sometimes it's just people have to hear it rather than just one guy saying it and one team seeing it. Is that they really do. I think it's just a human element thing. But also, I think it's now defenses were getting a little desperate. They're going, okay, it's swung back in a big way. Offenses swung back hard. And I think they're like, oh shit, we can't run. No,
we got to do something.
Can't all try. We got to do something. We can get to third down and run some cool blitz packages. But what the hell is happening on first and second down? Like
you're averaging 9 yards per attempt on first down. Who gives a shit? Yeah.
And every third down's 3rd and 3. Like you're not going to have a great blitz on 3rd and 3.
And teams are going for a 4th down now. So those are now rundowns on 3rd and 3.
And then what happens? Who's number one right now? Okay, who has done a good job the last few years. Okay, maybe there's something to it. Maybe there is something. And then you start asking yourself. People start self-scouting, opponent scouting, and I think it just goes from that. And also, like it's funny what Deontay was saying about or both of you guys have been saying, but also how they're forcing offenses to just be efficient as opposed to explosive. And it's so funny because again, this all goes in cycles, and that's what some of the Legion of Boom stuff that big 3 match stuff was they're like, not every quarterback's going to check it down. We're fine giving up the 6-yard gain to the running back every down. And you talk to any of those guys, all they would say is the worst quarterback that they could play against was Phillip Rivers, because he was the one guy that was willing to do it the entire field. Every drive, he was willing to check it down and hit the tight end. And that was the thing, is quarterbacks get bored. They want to take shots. And that was their philosophy on it. We're going to put our best corner to the right side, or the quarterback's right side. We're going to put the best pass rusher against the right tackle. Hey, we're going to play against the offensive tropes. And then the offenses finally figured it out. And now the defenses have to adjust again. And I think this is what we're seeing right now, is defenses kind of taking some ideas they already have, but just tweaking it a little bit. Like we say, coming from depth as opposed to maybe having a guy in the box already.
And I think to add to that, it is as simple as, the game of football, especially at the professional level, is never about, being ahead of whatever the curve is. We're always reacting, right? It's always a reactive game. And for me, that's why I think, when you look at how Belichick defended the Rams in the Super Bowl, then all of a sudden 3 or 4 or 5 teams the next year, they're breaking out the same kind of stuff. And I think that, when you look at Staley and Fangio, they're working in divisions where you're seeing the offenses that are starting to spread around the rest of the league, which is why now you're seeing more guys trying to poach off of that staff. That I really do think that sometimes it is as simple as that. It's just spread now to a point where I think the rest of the defensive coaches are looking around and saying, this is more than just some niche thing. Do the Rams have some special personnel? Obviously. But, on the other end, they do things that give guys problems. Kyle Shanahan has to change the way he calls offense when he's dealing with that type of defense. Sean McVay has to change the way he calls offense when he's dealing with that type of defense. And you guys covered a lot of those changes up in the offensive episode, but that really is what it is. If you ask any defensive coordinator if they felt that they could live in cover 1 all day, that's what they do.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. Everybody is looking for the path of least resistance. What is the most straight line I can take to being successful? And right now it looks like changing the math in terms of where we're making our investment. I say we, like I work in the NFL, but where NFL coaches.
You're a defensive guy. You can claim you're part of it.
Hey, I trust you.
I slip, but I think it's really just a change in the investment. The same way that on the offensive end, it's not about having 1,000 different concepts right now. It's about having a handful and having 1,000 different ways to present it.
Correct.
The
window. So 2 little wrinkles off that for your 3 or 4 explosive plays a game.
Such a good point. And also like the little tweaks that maybe they can do, like even watching the Rams defense, is just the 1E pressures that they run, the little single linebacker dog up the middle.
We're getting into that. Don't get ahead of my outline.
Okay, I won't get out of the outline, but okay, I'll put a pin in that. But I was going to say, that's just like an offense, just tweaking up a simple look, the same look, and just also make the other team adjust somewhere they didn't think they had to.
This episode is brought to you by The Zebra. Anyone who listens to the show knows it's been a big year for me when it comes to adult purchases. We bought a house. I bought a car in order to run errands for that house. There's so many considerations that go into those big purchases, the ones that really define your life. But one part doesn't get talked about nearly enough and gets overlooked way too often. Insurance. Americans overspend on car and home insurance by billions every year. That's money that can be better spent on all of the errands I need to run to keep up this house now. And that is where the Zebra can help you. The Zebra is the nation's leading insurance comparison site for car and home insurance. In minutes, you can compare policies from every major provider for free, all on one independent marketplace. After a few quick questions, the Zebra pairs people with the right insurance company for them, helping everyone save time and money. Buy online or over the phone with one of their licensed insurance agents. Make insurance your smartest purchase yet. Visit thezebra.com/maze to get your free quote today. That's thezebra.com/MAYS. This episode is brought to you by Freshly. We all know that dinner time during the week can be chaotic, can be stressful, can be a pain to figure out what you're going to eat. It's 6:05 p.m. Central Time right now. I don't know what I'm going to be eating for dinner. It's always something we run into with the time that we record this show. You want food that's fast, but isn't fast food. And that's where Freshly can help. Freshly offers chef-made, nutrient-packed, delicious meals delivered fresh to your door. No cooking required. Grocery shopping and cooking can be a pain, especially right now. And with Freshly, you don't have to do either. Your meals arrive cooked and fresh every week, so you can keep your fridge stocked and skip the trip to the store. Ordering is easy. Visit freshly.com and choose from over 30 delicious, satisfying, better-for-you meals, like steak peppercorn, sausage baked penne, or their chicken pesto bowl. Freshly can fit your lifestyle with a variety of plans and meals to pick from that work for your dietary needs, preferences, tastes, and family size. And now our listeners can try Freshly for just $6.16 per meal. Stop searching the internet for healthy food near me every night and start living life freshly. Your meals are always delivered fresh, never frozen, and are ready to heat and enjoy in just 3 minutes. With new meals added each week, Freshly brings the convenience of chef-made, nutritionist-designed classics right to your kitchen. Right now, Freshly is offering our listeners $40 off your first 2 orders when you go to freshly.com/maze. Stop stressing about dinner. Go to freshly.com/maze for $40 off your first 2 orders. That's freshly.com/MAYS for $40 off your first 2 orders. I want to get into some of the pressure stuff and the third down stuff here in a second. Before we do that, though, let's talk about Deontay, because you mentioned it's these things are reactionary and you have to see the concept and have it be proven out. And coaches are instinctual beings, as all of us are, right? One of the reasons that teams want to play these single high structures on early downs is because in their minds, we need this many guys to fit the run and make us sound against the run. And one of the things that the Rams showed last year is that you can survive in light boxes and play the run if you're going to do some of this funky front stuff. And the way that Staley explained it to me, the way that we've seen it in practice, is that you want to muddy up the front. And you could do that a bunch of different ways, right? We've talked about the tight front stuff on this show a bunch, where you have 3 interior defensive linemen within the tackles. It makes double teams much more difficult. We talked about how you can slant the front certain ways in order to muddy that up. So what do you think are the most translatable and replicable bits of front trickery, we'll call them, that will allow teams to live in some of these light boxes, if that is something that becomes more popular here over the next year or two?
I think that what's going to make it most palatable to defensive coaches who want to stay sound against the run is when you watch the Rams, what they're doing is creating base fronts with their safeties. It's a base run fit. We're just using safeties to create, to complete the front. It's kind of the way that I think about it. So they'll be in like 3-3-5 personnel, right? Where they have 3 down linemen. They have what looks like a 3-4 in the box, and then your nickel, corner, whether it's Jalen Ramsey or they're using a safety out there. And
that's the tight mid stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then on the run action, you see a safety come out of the roof. So, but they're playing cover 4. If it were just drop back pass, that guy would stay deep in his zone or zone match coverage. Mm-hmm. So it's that willingness to be able to insert safeties. And to your point, Robert, at the beginning of the podcast, you're talking about the way that we're changing these skill sets and what we're asking of guys at different positions. So that's really what's changing in the NFL. And that goes back to the point I was making about adding layers to your defense. And this is, I watched a clinic from Kirby Smart at the University of Georgia, their head coach, and he was talking about the same thing, right? Because one thing you'll see from like those Saban tree guys is they'll have like a 4-1 box. So 4 down linemen, 1 linebacker stacked over the back. And to your mind's eye, just looking at that, if you have any information on the way the offense is run, you should be able to say, hey, we should be able to run for 6.5, 7 yards every time against that.
That's exactly what you want them to think. That's the coolest part about this, is that you're playing into their instincts and their nature.
Yep. And they're doing these things with defensive linemen where they're playing like a gap and a half, where they're still being aggressive, like it's cover 3, where defensive linemen are looking to get up the field. So it's not a true 2-gap scheme, but at the last second, they're able to read the intention of the running back and be able to slide their body into the next gap inside. So to your point of muddying up the front, you do that. So now there's not the same kind of airspace. Running backs have to stop their feet. And at that point now, that safety that was 10 to 12 yards deep is now 6-7 yards away at linebacker depth, basically. And now he can add in and help you out in the run fit. Or your nickel, who's an overhang out by the slot, now he's back in the box because the run has been declared. So it's just changing the timing. Whereas, the last era of Legion of Boom and cover 3 and cover 1, what you would see against the run is every defender at the box at the line of scrimmage, basically as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Right. And it leads to a lot of negative plays, which can be an exciting form of football. But as we were saying earlier, you do expose yourself to the threat of explosive passes off of play action. Right. And there's less margin for error if you mess up in the run fit. The way that it is now, the trade-off is, hey, maybe the offense looks efficient because they're gaining 3.5, 4.5 yards per attempt, but they're not generating those explosive plays as a result because we're keeping the depth that we need in the defense.
So the way I'm thinking about this is 2 specific types of positions that become super, super important in comparison to the way we would used to think about them. You need guys up front that are able to, that are just a different paradigm of player, right? A guy that's not necessarily a quick penetrator, but somebody who can hold up and play that gap and a half. I'm looking at the Michael Brockers of the world and even like the Sebastian Joseph Days on the Rams last year. We're going to use them as the example, right? And then on the back end, that John Johnson type who is a really good diagnoser, who can play a little bit of linebacker if you need him to. Those 2 archetypes of players almost become more important than they've been. With the run stuffer, you can find that guy. That's a coaching point more than it is a physical profile of a guy. But that safety, it feels like that kind of queen on the chessboard that you didn't used to need before, Nate, becomes really, really important. And finding those guys becomes an interesting little journey and an interesting little treasure hunt for a lot of the teams trying to run this type of defense.
That's been one of my favorite things to watch with these kind of this last year or so, is seeing how the safety position has become so much more valuable. Really, it is. And I think it's going to be a position that's becoming more of the quarterback of the defense. Like I think it's already happening a little bit. I know there's 1 or 2 instances, but the green dot, who gets the play calls from the defensive coordinator, I think that's going to become the safety now. I really do. I think that safety position is going to have to be that high IQ dude now. It's not just going to be the rangy top guy or the big box safety anymore. You're going to need 2 guys that can kind of do it all. And I just use a term, but 2-way safety. And that's my highest compliment I can give to a guy. But that's where I just think that's just going to slowly, as it's a passing league, makes sense. So let's get it out of the mic who might be off the field on 3rd down because he can't cover anybody. Let's give it to the guy that's going to be there all 3 downs or 4 downs now, and also is going to have a say, because that defense is just going to be more top down with everything. Top down how they read it, top down how they look at it, top down how they fill everything, as opposed to the middle having to do up and down, if that makes sense, and then intermediate defenders. And what you guys are saying about stealing the gaps and stuff, honestly, that's the hardest part with that Rams defense, is that you look at it and you're like, that is a juicy run look right there. There are only 5 guys in the box. Yep. Oh, baby, let's do it. Zone it up. Let's go. Let's wad this up and let's shoot it. Let's find a gap and shoot. And it was like 2-yard gain. Even they weren't even like letting them get 5-yard gains, like a 2-yard gain, 3-yard gain. And you could tell offenses get frustrated because they would repeat calls and run the same thing the next play, going, no, it's there. You could tell, I could hear the line coach going, it's there. Just the left guard's got to hold his block, 1 block. And then it's like, yeah, but it didn't work. So, but that is something too, is playing in the Big Ten, we played against a whole bunch of quarters, because that was just the staple defense of the Big Ten for a while when I was there in the late 2000 dots. But with that, it was like you were always trying to put the safety in a bind. So it's gonna be really funny, because as you know, Deontay too, is that in a quarter safety, what they have to do in coverage, sometimes they have to drive on a dig, they have to drive on something underneath, and now you're you're going to see a lot more of the concepts with a lot of dig posts because you're trying to get one safety to drive and you're going to try to hit the post over the top. And that's something we're going to see more mills, as most guys call it, but a version of that type of stuff. And it's kind of cool to see, like you said, the archetypes is that safety now has to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the weaknesses. The Legion of Boom was used to curl flats. Now I want to see what the next step is with these defenses going, like how we pass that off. What's the next rule for them? And also just the player types too. I think it's kind of a twofold thing. It's becoming just a more athletic sport or just a faster sport. Guys can be smaller playing inside at linebacker and also at O-line. To be a guard, you can be a 307-pound guard now. You don't have to be 330 gap plugging guard. That's why we see more outside zone teams, and why more teams can be outside zone teams is because defenses are getting lighter and faster. So now you don't have to worry about your 300-pound guard getting blown up every down by some plugging linebacker or some plugging, some D tackle or two noses basically up front. They're just going to blow you up. Defenses get lighter. Offenses now have the ability to go lighter or run more quote unquote finesse stuff. I just think that stuff's really cool. I think more defenses are going to really look more into, it's going to be a lot of like bodies. It's going to look like a bunch of wings on a basketball court where, it's interchangeable. Like we saw with Dean Peace 2 years ago. We've talked about this a little bit, Robert. We're going to see more of that, like especially in blitz packages. I know we're going to talk about in a sec, but especially just on base downs, just having a lot of like bodies. You have your D tackle and then a bunch of guys that are 230, 250 pound range with movement and speed. If you're going to run this stuff and you want to run coverage stuff where you have guys at the line of scrimmage and they have to get all the way out, they have to be athletic and can run. And that's why we're going to just see more and more and more of these linebackers and a lot more of these smart safeties and fast linebackers, as opposed to a smart linebacker and a fast safety.
So let me take that a step further though. Up front, it almost feels like you'd want to be bigger than your first thought would lead you to, because where we used to live in a world where it's a lot of just one gap penetrating stuff. We have these 250-pound defensive ends, these 285-pound defensive tackles. Now you can live with a 290-pound defensive end that's not necessarily the best pass rusher, because his ability to control bodies, plug gaps in the run game and everything else now almost becomes not more important, but the ratio of pass to run shifts a little bit. Would you say that's fair, Deontay, that we're going to see more bigger defensive linemen, more bigger defensive lines, period, because having those penetrators maybe isn't the most important thing?
Absolutely. I was going to say, I didn't want to jump in front of Nate, but I was going to say is that the body archetypes at all these positions defensively are changing. So like the Saints, for example, they're another team that play a lot of cover 4 on early downs. And when you think about, at the safety position, Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins, on size and ability, those guys can be anywhere on the football field, on a given snap. And I think that that's where we're trending both on the front end and on the perimeter. So I do think that now what we may see are more defenses that are willing to say, hey, if we just get one good pass rusher and everybody else is just a beefy guy who can eat up gaps, we'll live with that. Because to your point with pressure, we'll find other ways to be able to generate looks where we can speed up a quarterback. We'll use our speed guys. Now we have a guy that instead of being a 245-pound Sam Backer, that's a 215-pound, safety, nickel safety, or a slot corner who's 200 pounds and runs a 4.3. The timing is going to be different now. If we scheme this up right, we can get free runners. And that is where I think the game is going. So while we are still kind of in a 4-down world, I do think that body types are going to change. It's not going to be guys looking for an Aaron Donald or a prime Fletcher Cox to play the 3 technique. It's just going to be a guy who can eat up a guard and play a gap and a half. Like I said, the ability to stand in the B gap and still have body presence in the A gap if I absolutely have to do so.
And it makes sense when you say the fronts being more of a 3-3-5 personnel. That's really just a sub package 3-4. And it makes sense. What do you picture the front 3 in a 3-4? Big 2 gap and run pluggers. So it actually kind of makes sense that the nickel version or the sub version of that, the 3-3-5 type mint stuff, is going to have similar type of bodies, maybe just a little half tier down than maybe that traditional 90s 3-4 Blitzburg style. But it's like that. It makes sense. And it's kind of cool. But that's the thing is all those like really good teams, those 3-4 teams, they usually had one outside linebacker that was pretty damn good as a pass rusher, the James Harrisons or, LT, so usually you still have that OLB that can make, or as we call it, edge now, but yeah, same concept.
All right, so let's get into the pressure third down stuff that Nate can't help himself about. So with this, we've talked all about early downs here, but like you and I were talking about before we started recording, Deontay, on third down in these pass heavy looks, that's when you truly know what a defense wants to be, because that's how they want to defend the pass. So when you were looking at some of these third down trends, third down little tips that you picked up, what were your general takeaways about where the game might be going on third down, where defenses are becoming most efficient in those situations?
Funnily enough, I actually think that we will still see something that's pretty resemblant of what we've seen in football up to this point, because I do think that defensive coaches still believe the most valuable way to stop the pass is to pressure the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
We will have, obviously, as game plans come up, or specific, opponents. If you're playing a Patrick Mahomes, you probably do want to play more in coverage than you do a pass rush, just because of how you can be punished by their receiving core and his ability to get the ball out fast. But all things remaining equal, I think we will still see an NFL that is heavy on man coverage, and we're just going to see a plethora of different pressure patterns. And now, because we're playing with more coverage bodies out on the perimeter, the possibilities in terms of pressure are going way up. Because, that's something that I really liked when I was watching Steve Spagnuolo coach the Chiefs defense throughout the year. It's like he would get into these 6-7 DB looks, but he's running cover zero blitzes. And it causes the exact same problems for an offense because you're overloaded, and they actually have the coverage bodies to create the same kinds of issues that they would a nickel team just bringing maybe one backer and playing a fire zone. They can actually make an even a bigger investment into getting pressure without it coming at the expense of coverage. The Ravens do a good job of this as well. They've got sub packages, out the ass, and they will run as many different cover zero blitzes as you can think of, for the same reason, because the investment is worth it. They're not costing themselves in coverage, and that, I think that also ties into the conversation we're having about archetypes and who you want in what spots, because defenses are becoming more coverage oriented. On third downs now, it's not going to be about, hey, let's maximize our zone coverage. Let's just think about matching up with these patterns. Now it's going to be, hey, my safety is 195 pounds, and he does run a 4.4. And is he perfect against the slot? No, but he's close enough that if I can speed up this quarterback's process from 2.8 seconds to 2.1, that can be the difference in, a completion for a first down and a sack or a sack strip or an incomplete pass. So that's really kind of where I think that the game is going. We're just going to see a newer form of generating pressure that's not just, hey, two edges, maybe we've got a winning three technique, or we'll bring one edge inside and add our third pass rusher out on the edge, and we're going to try to create one-on-ones up front and stay as heavy in coverage and play two-man and all that type of stuff. There's a place for it, but more often than not, I think what we'll see is cover one, we're going to man up across the board, and we'll make sure we have enough coverage bodies to where our entire pressure package is available to us without it coming at the cost of explosive passes.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny because going back and watching a lot of those teams over the last couple of days, Baltimore, New Orleans does really fun stuff too, because what they do, I really enjoyed watching what they do, because with Baltimore, you have all of these just creepers, 7 guys along the line of scrimmage. Who knows who the hell is coming? New Orleans has a version of that, but they play with a 3-man front, which you would think that doesn't show an investment into pass rush, but they walk 2 linebackers up. So even in their sub packages, rather than taking a linebacker off the field, they take a defensive lineman off the field, because when those 2 guys walked up into the A gap, you don't know who's coming. So it's all about unpredictability at this point. And you have so many of these teams with those creeper looks, with these pressure looks, you have no idea what's happening. I think the world of remember how there was all that talk about bringing 4 and being able to rush with 4 is the most important thing. If you can rush with 4, that's how you're going to be able to stop some of these guys. I think, Nate, those days are done. Even if you have 4 pass rushers, I think the best teams are bringing 5 a lot of the time on third down. And I don't think we're ever going to see a team just line up 4 guys. These are the gaps they're lined up in. That's where they're coming. Every single one of these teams, crazy stunts, crazy different blitzes, crazy twists. I think that sort of creativity up front is where you're going to have to go to survive on third down, no matter what you play behind it.
Absolutely. You guys have both touched on it, but even with the Ravens, they're using that aggression. They're just, it's like raising a guy in poker. You're making them make the bet, making them make the decision, putting all the pressure on them. Spags does this fantastic way. I'm glad, Deontay brought him up too, because it's just, not everyone has the perfect quarterback. Okay. Say you do have a perfect quarterback. Not everyone has the best protection. Okay. Say you do have good protection. Not everyone has the best scheme. Okay. So now they're forcing you to be right. And not everyone, as we know, not everyone's right every single snap. And they're saying, hey, if you are right, you got us. Good job. Like, okay, we're going to bring it right back at you and throw a fastball at you. Because really, and that's what we talked about the other day, was that's why you need a quarterback to get you a bucket, because not everything's going to be perfect, because sometimes that is what messes more than anything up, is you're on these blitz pressures or simulated pressures or blitzes, match coverage even. Defenses have a clock in their head too. And Deontay, like if you're a corner, at certain yardages to look for the ball, and then it's like, okay, scramble drill rules, like you have a clock in your head as well. So if you get a quarterback that can create it, screws everything up, because all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, wait, that route, that's not the route distribution they run. But yeah, because it's scramble rules, that's what happens. And that's where I was talking to, is those like body things, the DP stuff is just, you guys nailed it. It's just, it creates edginess for the offense. What you're trying to do with pressures, I know as an offensive guy, is if we can't get all of our eligibles out, if we have a 6-man protection, the 5 offensive line, the running back, and that running back is wasted when he doesn't have to be wasted, or that running back ends up on a D end and as opposed to blitzing linebacker or safety. And, offenses, a lot of their rules are on like bodies, just as defenses are. You're going to have a safety match with a tight end. Corner is going to be with a corner, linebacker or a safety is going to be with a running back, like bodies. Same thing for protections. Offenses have their own rules. I just did what Deontay did. We have our own rules. But if we're looking at this stuff, I know if I'm just watching nickel defense versus my 11 personnel, I know, okay, the safety is going to be on the wide tight end. That linebacker is going to be on the running back. We're good. Corner on corner, corner on corner. Say you have 7 DBs there. Okay, so who's covering the Y? Who's covering the running back? Unless we're empty and we make them declare. And that's another reason why motion is so important, because offenses are getting more comfortable running more vertical concepts with 5-man protection, because you're getting all the eligibles out rather than just creating edginess and like guessing, like hoping that our prep was really, really good this week. Let's just get them all out and let our awesome quarterback find an answer. That is what offenses are starting to do, because they're saying, defenses are making us waste a running back or getting the running back on a guy, or they're overloading a side and it's 3, you have the left guard and the left tackle just blocking to air. Like they're getting so much better at doing that. Deontay has bounced blitz off the ideas off of me when he's like, that's why I always hate when teams offenses full slide sometimes, because you waste a tight end and a running back and it might just be 5 guys blitzing. And it's like, or bringing pressure. And it's like, now we have 2 guys that are wasted. They're just hanging out back there. And that's why I always get on Cliff all the time with the Cardinals. That's a whole other thing. It's like I have like a Joe DiMaggio, I think, streak going on where I either take a knock at Drew Lock or Cliff Kingsbury on this podcast. I think I have a list. I mean, one of them gets hit every single time I'm on this podcast. I'm so sorry, but that's the same thing. That's why it's so important. And that's what an aggressive defense does. It goes, you have to be perfect, or your quarterback has to be perfect. And not every team has that on every third down or every pressure look.
I mean, and I think it's funny you bring that up, because what I thought about before we entered this era of using these sub personnel packages to create pressure, the first thing I thought about was what the Seahawks used to do during the Legion of Boom era, where it was Cliff Averill as on a 1-on-1, and we load up 3 defensive linemen on the opposite side. And now the defense is telling you where you are sliding your protection, because there's absolutely no way you can slide away from the overloaded side. Otherwise, your quarterback's going to be eating grass, So, and that's a great way to manufacture the matchups you want. And now we're looking at an era of, hey, let's play more coverage. There's more space in the game, better receivers in the slot now, better tight ends now, and quarterbacks are so proficient at being able to fit balls into tighter windows than they used to be. There has to be a way for a defense to dictate to the offense what is and isn't available to them. So as Nate said, keeping the running back in protection, that's like, for me as a coach, that's always priority number 1 on obvious passing downs. Can I shrink the amount of people that I know are out in the route? If I can do that, then I know that gives me a better chance to survive. Then from there, it's where can you manufacture the 1-on-1 in the pass rush? And now, because body types are changing, and I think that protections on the NFL level are becoming a little bit more static, it's a little bit easier for the defense to say, hey, when we get obvious passing downs, I know if I go to your point, Robert, where it's 3-3-5 personnel or 3-2-6 personnel, and you got two defensive linemen standing in the C gap, two guards being covered by inside linebackers in a nose, and I make it look like we're either playing cover zero or two man, you're going to protect that a certain way. And if I fire the nickel or dime player at the right time with the right pressure pattern, I might get my 275-pound defensive end running down the chest of your running back, or I might get an unblocked guy. And even if I don't, the investment doesn't kill me, as I said, because I know that I've still got the coverage bodies. We're not just sending 7, right? Not just peeling off everybody, after the quarterback. It's like targeted missiles. That's really the way I like to think about it.
So it's interesting to me because we talk about, like you said, Deontay, pressure is important. And the idea of pressure and getting pressure will always be king in those situations. The Ravens are a great example. The Saints send a lot of pressure. Some of the best defenses in the league. Miami, the Patriots play a lot of man in those situations. But there's a difference between valuing pressure and valuing the players who used to create pressure in your mind. So it almost feels like the conversation we had about early downs, the conversation we're having about these situations. Today, many small business owners are busier than ever. Because they're focused on managing and growing their business, they can't always spend the time they wish they could on recruiting. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has made it easier to find and hire the best candidates for free. Get started by posting your job for free to reach LinkedIn's network of over 740 million professionals. Fill out targeted screening questions to get your role in front of the most qualified candidates with the experience, skills, and motivation you need. Then use simple tools to filter and prioritize the top candidates you'd like to interview. LinkedIn Jobs can help you hire the right person for your role. And your first job post is free. Just visit linkedin.com/maze. Again, that's linkedin.com/mays to post your first job for free. Terms and conditions apply. If you're feeling drained after your workout, then True Niagen might be for you. True Niagen is great. True Niagen fuels the body's energy engines, maintains cellular metabolism, and even supports heart health. With 11 published human clinical studies and backed by Nobel Prize winners, True Niagen is a supplement that's clinically proven to boost NAD levels, an essential coenzyme required for cellular energy and repair. Taking True Niagen can help you with muscle recovery after a workout, add more vitality to your life today with True Niagen. Right now, new customers can save 10% on their first purchase by going to TrueNiagen.com/maze. That's TrueNiagen.com/mays to save 10% off your first purchase. TrueNiagen.com/maze. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever run into something that interferes with your happiness or prevents you from achieving your goals and spending time the way that you want to? I know that I certainly have in the past, and as part of the process of figuring that out, how to orient my time and how to just situate my life, I regularly see a therapist. BetterHelp will help you assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient, you can start communicating in under 48 hours. BetterHelp is not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. You can send a message to your counselor anytime, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if necessary. It's more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available. Anything you share is confidential, and the entire process is convenient, professional, and affordable. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp, they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/maze. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/MAYS. Nate, do you think pure pass rushers, those 250 to 260 pound guys that were paying $25 million a year to get after the quarterback, do you think that is an antiquated way to think about resources if pressure is going to be a more by committee choice, even if the importance of it has not shrunk? And we're talking about only having one edge rusher on the field and early
one
down.
at a time.
It's coming from two different directions.
I mean, when we did our non-quarterback draft, it is telling when you go like who would be willing to draft either the young guys or the heavy contract guys, but really stars. It's like, I mean, there's less elite pass rushers than there are elite quarterbacks, or about the same. That's how we have to look at it. It's like that's how hard it is to find an elite pass rusher or a very good one. It's just like quarterbacks. I mean, it's really hard to find those guys. I think it's always going to be the guy you're looking for, but I think what now is those guys that we threw away at the beginning, the push the pocket guys, the guys that are just, he's a bull rush only guy. I think now those guys now their value has raised, as opposed to the bendy-esh guys, or like, that's always going to be the guy we're looking for. But now it's more like, hey, this 270-pound tweener that we don't know if it's a 3-tech or, an end. Well, we could just have him line up over the guard or line up for the right tackle and just push the pocket, which is something that Bill Belichick has done for years and years and years.
Totally.
Is what he has done is what his philosophy is. And there's some similarities. I mean, it's very funny how the hybrid ideas, cross-pollination is, his idea was our coverage, our double coverage. We're going to take away your number one option. Boom. Everyone else is manned up. We're going to make the quarterback double clutch the ball. He can't just get it off on the back foot of his drop. And that pocket's going to be so pushed in on you that all of a sudden it's like, oh, shoot. And then you can't throw it clean, or your feet aren't set. They're just making the throws harder and harder. And I think it's kind of the similar type of thinking. I think those types of guys, everyone's going like, yeah, it's actually not that bad. Like, okay, maybe we didn't think this guy's not going to be a 10-sack guy, but 4.5, 5.5 sacks isn't too bad when we have 4 of them getting, 5, 6 sacks. Like, and we have a lot of those kind of tweener types. I think those guys are getting a little more value now, where it's like, we have a spot for him now. I think back in prior years, it was like, I don't know where I'm going to play this guy.
Well, let's think about two different teams and the players on those teams, right? If you look at the Saints and the defensive ends, the types of defensive ends they value, it is those guys on the bigger side. Cam Jordan, Trey Hendrickson played that way, even if he might have been 10 pounds lighter. And then think about Baltimore. Think about how many 270-pound, even off-ball guys the Ravens play with. Matt Judon, Zadarius Smith. I think those are perfect examples. So it's so interesting. I mean, and that goes to, all right, then if we're not going to, because those guys, let's think about Judon, Zadarius Smith, because they're tweeners, they fall in the draft. So then are we going to spend more premium resources on guys on the back end? Every single little bit of give and take leads to another consideration here. But a couple of these teams aren't really that man heavy compared to the rest of the league on third down. And they aren't bringing as much exotic pressure. Teams like Washington, teams like the Rams. Are there takeaways that we can find from those teams in that group that you think could inform what defenses are doing on third down moving forward?
I think that, and this is actually interesting. Before we started this podcast, I was actually speaking with Brandon Staley for.
I know you were.
Podcast. And before we started, obviously, I wanted to try to be mindful of, not asking him to divulge too much information. So before we started the podcast, one thing that I did ask that I felt like he'd be comfortable with me sharing is, why play something like cover when it's 3x1? Why play cover 2 over the cover or the trip side and play cover 4 on the single receiver side? And his idea was, you want to try to be 5 over 3 as often as possible. And that really struck me, on the NFL, at the NFL level, even with the personnel that he had that is available to him with LA, he was thinking, I don't want guys in one-on-one scenarios if I can help it, or I want to mitigate one-on-ones as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So whether you're from the Belichick school, where the idea is, hey, we're still going to play man, but now we're going to double your best, right? And then I'll toggle with personnel. So my best corner is on your number 2 or your number 3 wide receiver, and then we're doubling the other guys and constricting airspace that way. Or you're going at it at the more kind of zone, Staley, Fangio type of approach, where we're just going to flood the area as much as possible. We're not thinking so much about pressure. What we're going to do is make your quarterback, like you said, we're going to pat the ball. Yep. And I'm going to see what kind of quarterback you actually are under that type of duress. Yes. Are you able to go from alert to 1 to 2 to 3 to check down? If you extend, are you actually able to extend and then fit the ball into a tight window once my coverage defenders start finding receivers to get matched up to? So that, if you're not pressuring, that's probably what we're going to see is maybe teams looking for, they'll always be looking for that number 1 corner who can live in one-on-one coverage. But it's not necessarily just to say, hey, we want to play cover 3 and we've got a lockdown corner. So now my middle of field safety can shade to my weaker corner. It's more of, we'll live a one-on-one and we're actually just going to overinvest in creating as many tight windows as possible with zone coverage. And if you want to extend, you can, but don't think that just because you're extending the play that you're going to be finding a wide open guy, right, streaking across the middle of the field. That's probably not going to happen.
It's so much like basketball, isn't it? It's just like, It really is. Like it's like a 2-3 zone or 1-3-1 trap. Really, it's just flooded with arms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the quarterback, you expect certain lanes. You have to anticipate. It's such a bizarre thing to say, but it's like, you're not seeing everything when you throw a football. And all of a sudden, if I see two arms where I'm about to throw that dig, or two arms where I'm about to throw that seam bender, or two sets of arms, I should say, check it down. It's like, unless I'm a baller and there's some guys that can do it, like they go, okay, I watched them. Okay, no, I'm good. I can still rip that throw. There's a lot of guys though that are like, oosh, okay, double clutch and check it down. And also, like, you see, and we've talked about this, Robert, too, we see more of the 4 strong concepts that are coming. Having this defense that is so adjustable, rather than have one guy rotated down, oh shoot, we got to rotate back. Everyone just kind of pushes. And you just see the whole defense kind of push over. No one really has to adjust that much, because it's like, hey, we still flooded the zone. They're trying to flood us, but we're already flooded. So, okay, we're good. Like, we just have to pass it off. And the best example is that was the Rams last year against the Seahawks. Because I've talked about 4x1 concepts, and Schottenheimer tried. He tried to run some, and it was a clinic tape. It really was, watching the Rams pass that stuff off and communicate it. It helps having Ramsey. Don't get me wrong. We've all said it. It does help having that guy that can truly be isolated, but having just everybody else flood all those other zones, that's stuff that you think that guy's going to pop, that seam's going to pop, that swing's going to pop. And all of a sudden it's like, shoot, there's a guy near there. It sucks. As a quarterback, that sucks. Because all of a sudden now you go, well, our whole game plan is these types of concepts. Oh boy, I thought there was going to be a couple clean throws, some gimme throws. As a quarterback, you don't want to make a god tier throw every time. You want to do that once or twice a game. Not every series have to do that just to create an explosive play. And that's what that defense makes you do sometimes.
I think for a football layman, though, you'd think of a guy like that can be one-on-one with the receiver, and you think pressure concepts on third down, I can play man coverage. But the idea of using that guy in zone on that locked back side as a way to redistribute your resources in coverage rather than with pressure, that to me is so interesting. When you watched them last year, watching Ramsey locked on the backside on guys, and just think about it. Just think about one guy on an island and then everyone else over here. That island, you typically think man coverage first, but now it's just a different way to think about it. And I think structurally it's so interesting when you see it in practice.
It really is.
And to Nate's point, it's all about upsetting the timing of the quarterback. And you'll pull up film, and you'll watch, and, if you have an understanding of what the offense is trying to do, in your head, you may be working through the progression, and all of a sudden you'll see a wide receiver maybe break open on a dig, but the ball's already been out because it's checked down, because the quarterback said, hey, first look wasn't there. Second look was iffy. I'm not sure about that. I'm just going to go ahead and take this hitch. I'll go ahead and just take this over the ball route, and we'll take our 4.5 yards. Tight end, go make a play for me, please. Get me the last 4 yards. Running back, make a guy miss. Because I'm not confident in myself as a quarterback to be able to fit the ball into a window I was expecting to have maybe 2 or 3 yards of space to throw a guy into, versus I've got to put this right on his numbers if we're going to have a chance to complete this pass.
And this was even match coverage, but it was more just kind of like zigging when everyone else is zagging kind of thing. And Deontay, and I know Robert, you saw it too, was especially on third and extra long, teams just started running that sticks coverage. And I've talked about this before, is why I was intrigued at first by Matt Nagy, because I heard about it, was that what defenses were doing. Like I said, defense became playing top down and rallying to tackle on third down. Okay, you'll get 12 yards on 3rd and 15, but you're still 3 yards short. Hey, it's 3rd and 10, you get 8 yards. And they're fine doing that. There's still teams that do it on 3rd and extra long. But he said, rather than try and do this whole blocking and everyone protect, or we'll do some gimmicky play where we hook and ladder and try and get the first down, he said, I have Tyreek Hill. It was Alex Smith at the time. I have Tyreek Hill. Bombs away, baby. Hey, you want to play top down? All right, I'm going to go over the top of your top. But the same type of thing, that was kind of like a little inkling that was like, offenses are like, all right, stop being efficient. Let's look for explosive plays. And I think that was one of those things. That was just one little instance of why offenses now are going like, yeah, it's no use. It's like we talked about on the offenses podcast, Robert. Yeah, getting 4 yards in the run game is great, but you know what's even better? Getting 12 yards. and yeah, okay, we might, hey, if we get 2 4-yard gains on 3 runs, okay, all right, that's not bad. It's sufficient 2 out of 3 times. But if you get 1 20-yard gain on those 3 runs, okay, I'd like that better. That's 2 first downs I just earned right there. And I think that's what it's funny is defenses go, oh, we're going to make you be efficient. And now offenses are going, no, we don't like that. Let's try and be more explosive. And it's just, I think it's just, it's just going to keep going and keep going the next year, next 2 years, next 3 years.
I was going to say that's the tug of war. And when I was watching these clips, what I was expecting to see was quarterbacks be a little bit more willing to take the fade, or to take the post. And offenses be more willing to call for the fade and call for the post. And I just think that maybe offenses aren't all the way there yet. They're still maybe kind of trying to find their comfortability with getting back to some of those 7-step drop concepts, the Mills concepts, like you were saying, not looking for shallow crossers anymore. And if you look at maybe some of like the adjusted depth of target by coverage, you will see that it is a tick up against quarters coverage than what it is against cover 3. So I think the quarterbacks are able to process a little bit of, okay, I see the shell and I know that the dig should be there. Maybe I want the dig, but it's going to take a little bit of time for offensive coaches to get away from, hey, let's get away from these middle of field close beaters and get back to some of the stuff that we were seeing when teams were running Tampa 2, when teams were running old school cover 4. And that's what I think the next kind of, trade-off in this tug of war is going to be.
It's also interesting because it feels like those supernova quarterbacks become such an important part of that equation, right? Because if you want the guy to look at the deep post or look at some of those more explosive routes first, having these guys that can place it anywhere on the field at any time becomes such an advantage when you have to shift that type of thinking.
Yes. And that's, we talked about when you play against 2-man, what 2-man makes you do is either quarterback scramble or quarterback make a ball or throw, like hit that sail ball or hit that bender. Same type of thing it's sometimes quarterbacks, we've been drilled, be efficient, and every possession with a kick, and every this, nothing wrong with taking a check down and living another day, all this stuff. But now it's becoming more back to the old school thinking. It's funny. This is more like 70s football thinking. Okay. A pick
Lift
can
off,
happen,
baby.
Yeah. But let's bombs away on this. Let's go. And that's awesome. And we're getting like that more efficient, like, just bombs away offense, or teams are finding the concepts that they like. But like you said, Deontay, that's such a good point, is that it's hard for some of these coaches to all of a sudden go like, oh yeah, okay, maybe picks aren't that bad, or maybe a deep sack, we're going to have to take a couple licks. Like we're going to have to eat more sacks if we're going to live this way. But we're already seeing it. I think offenses, we get younger coaches that are more willing to do this. It's just going to, and quarterbacks that are willing to make these throws, it's only going to get better. Like it's just, you're going to see more better from the offensive perspective. I'm sorry, Deontay, but
that's why I'm so pumped. That's why I'm so excited to watch Herbert, because
it's
now you have a quarterback like that playing in an offense for a head coach that designs these types of defenses. And it just feels like this weird interplay that's almost going to be this experiment that I'm really looking forward to. Exactly. Exactly.
It's actually funny because now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, football is probably the last one of this party, because if you think of the other major sports, what is everybody doing in baseball now? It's launch angle. Launch angle.
Home runs or walks, baby. Home runs, strikeouts, walks.
Exactly. Yeah. We're either hitting a 440-foot bomb, or you're striking me out, or I'm taking a walk. In basketball, we're not going to battle with all these set defenses now. We come down, if only 6 seconds have gone off on the shot clock, but you got a clean look from 3, from 29 feet. Just shoot the ball. That's the best shot we're going to get. Let's not try to be perfect. Let's be explosive, and we'll live with the variance that comes with that. Offense now, and it makes sense strategically. They're playing cover 3. Everybody's deep. Just check it down. We can all feel good about that. Nobody gets fired when you check it down, right? But now we're moving into an era where that's just not going to be sufficient. But yeah, nobody gets fired, when you check it down in cover 3. But I think that now it's just not sufficient. It's time to take those shots, play the variance game, be a legend, take the chance. If it works, it works. If it works, you can be the 2018, 2019, 2020 Chiefs. If it doesn't, hey, you may get close enough. You can still be the 2020 Bills. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. We talked about on the offense podcast, Robert, about like the Chiefs are one of the teams, they can get away with a lot because of Mahomes, but other teams are going to do it. I've seen Green Bay do it. I've seen Buffalo do this. I've seen a few other really good offenses do it. They're tying in more deeper concepts with quick game protection, with 5-man protection. And that's because defenses got so good about the rules of the offense and the timing of the quarterback that now it's like, well, now we got to fuck with that. Now we got to screw up their timing. Now we got to extend the routes. We got to run more vertical routes with all 5 eligibles getting out there, and not just a running back on a check down that our linebacker can go, okay, I can sink. All right, I'll drive on it. It's no, threatening, verticality. And what verticality is explosive plays. And that what it is gash or be gashed. And it's awesome. I think it's going to be fun because we get to see awesome pressures. We get to see speed on defense. No one hates speed. That's me as a Wisconsin
Badger. And no
Badger
one hates quarterbacks with howitzers either. I mean, that's the fun part about
big
this.
athletic quarterbacks making awesome plays. Yeah, let's do that. So I think that's what's so cool. I think NFL football and just football in general is going in a really cool direction.
And to be clear, that works for the defensive end as well. More pressures, more sacks, more sack strips, more interceptions. I think it's time to play the variance game in this sport. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what this tug of war is going to be like over the next decade or so.
Yeah. Awesome. Gentlemen, that was a fantastic conversation. Sincerely appreciate your time, Deontay. We could not have done that without you. Literally, we could not have done that without you. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure it will not be the last time. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. I would sincerely appreciate that. Please subscribe to our new Apple bonus content if you'd like. I answered some listener questions. Those are available there. We're going to be rolling one of those out every single week. I think you guys will enjoy it. But the normal feed will still be coming your way. I've had some people have questions about that. The podcast will still be coming to you in the way that it always has, so do not fret. Please subscribe to The Athletic, theathletic.com/football show. We have a ton of great stuff, as always, going up. Ted had a really good conversation with Mike Kafka that's on the site this week. Endless stream of great football, knowledge, content, everything on The Athletic. If you are not subscribed, I do not know what you're doing. We will be back next week, hopefully with a guest. I have not finished booking one, but it sounds like we're going to make that happen. I know Nate and I will be back with Lindsay, so at the very least, be ready for that. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy your weather. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.
This was the Athletic Football Show.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever run into something that interferes with your happiness or prevents you from achieving your goals and spending time the way that you want to? I know that I certainly have in the past, and as part of the process of figuring that out, how to orient my time and how to just situate my life, I regularly see a therapist. BetterHelp will help you assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient, you can start communicating in under 48 hours. BetterHelp is not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. You can send a message to your counselor anytime, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if necessary. It's more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available. Anything you share is confidential, and the entire process is convenient, professional, and affordable. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp, they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/maze. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/MAYS.